Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. As you've heard in countless previous episodes, this show takes deep dives into the darkest days, struggles, adversities, and transformations, and so much more. And at times, I know it can seem pretty heavy. It can sound pretty heavy, but it's quite necessary for helping others and giving people a sense of hope. It's truly, truly important. However, for a lighter, more spirited conversation, I want to personally invite you to subscribe to our sister podcast, Talking in Threes. That's right. We are talking about three of our favorite anything, countless topics, anywhere from sports to pizza toppings to movies, TV shows, animals, and so much more. I invite you to share your three favorites as well. And to be a part of it, just join our public Facebook group and subscribe to the podcast. I'll leave the links for both in the episode show notes. All right. My special guest is a public speaker, author, and a licensed psychotherapist. Her expertise lies in helping her clients externalizing feelings they're ashamed to exhibit, at least in public. They are serious virtues. There's so much serious virtues to this that we're going to unpack. I'm very excited about this. But her awesome work has successfully helped people break free of depression, anxiety, bipolar, and more. Let's welcome Bronwyn Schweigerdt to the show. Bronwyn, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Aubrey. I hope I don't disappoint. Man, that was quite a lead in.
Oh, no, we are thrilled to have you. We truly are. So, all right. We have a lot to unpack. I am truly excited about this because, well, I have selfish reasons as well. I mean, we're all human. We have our behaviors, right? But for the benefit of the listeners as well, because we are truly emotional beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, not quite sure if my first question is going to make sense here, but I'm going to try to break it down. I guess my initial question would be, in your experience with your clients, has there been, or what was the initial issue or cause for a client to visit you or to begin talking with you? Is it related to relationships or behavior or um, before any diagnosis is made of depression or bipolar?
Mm. Okay, that's a good question, actually. So most of my clients come to me because they're struggling with anxiety and
Okay.
they feel a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
I would say the majority of them have felt anxiety like chronically their whole lives, but now it's up
Right.
to a notch that is not workable anymore for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, it's always rooted in relational issues. Sometimes they don't know that. Sometimes
I
they're
see.
like, what can I do about my anxiety? And I'm like, well, it sounds like it's, your mother or
Yes.
your partner. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's not going to change. But what can I do about me? How can I, turn myself more and more into a pretzel?
Yeah.
I can be happy and they can be happy.
Yes.
And, eventually they come to see like, well, that's just actually not possible. So, because most of the people who seek out therapy are people who are willing to change. And they're a
Right.
self-selective group because not everyone would come to a therapist and not everyone is willing to change. Not everyone is willing to even acknowledge that they need to change like one iota. So I am going to get the people who are like, what else can I do? And they
Yes.
just want to keep changing them. And again, they're up against like a partner or a parent that it's just not possible for them to placate.
I see. So in some cases, people would approach you or come to you if they have reached an impasse. I would imagine, or not quite sure what next direction to take. And that's good to know. That's actually tremendous to know because one thing you did mention that resonated with me is that, the people that come to you, the people that you take are the people who want to change. They want to make a difference. They want to not only change, but figure out where the change needs to be made. It may not always lie on one person. It may lie on in multiple people if it's a relational type of problem, it sounds like. So here on the Roads Rediscovery, we have four pillars to personal growth. And the first one, which is foundational, is self awareness. So I
Mm.
want to ask you, Bronwyn, um, can you give us a glimpse into um, how, and if so, how much self awareness is required or that it involves for someone to have, preliminary before approaching you for help?
Oh, that's a good question. So here's my take on that, Aubrey.
Mhm.
I think we are all, and that includes me as a therapist, we are all blind to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need other people to be our mirror. And a good
Mhm.
therapist or a good friend will be
Mhm.
a good mirror, a mirror that is not like distorted, not
Yes.
giving, reflecting back to you a distorted image of yourself, but a true
Right.
reflection. And not all therapists are good mirrors whatsoever. I became a therapist because I could not find a good therapist
Right.
and
Right.
I desperately needed one. Um,
Uh-huh.
so unfortunately, that's not, just because you're going to therapy doesn't mean you're going to get that mirror.
Right.
That's something that you should seek out, though, and be very picky until you find one. But a good friend can be that person. But we are all blind to ourselves. So
Mhm.
it is important. I'm a big advocate of taking time to reflect, just
Yes.
reflection,
Yes.
not meditation, because meditation is kind of emptying our minds,
Right.
more like just having kind of an open mind, not throwing everything out, to empty it all the time, but just letting whatever comes in. And
Yeah.
meditation would tell you, okay, now let it go through. And I would say, as for reflection, let it stay and let yourself ponder or
Mm.
muse. Like the word
Yes.
muse, we don't really use anymore. It's like an old English word, but
Yeah.
muse means to ponder, to contemplate. Um, and ironically, the word amuse, as in amusement, means no pondering, no contemplation. So if
Right.
we're being amused all the time, we are not reflecting, we're not able to see ourselves or have introspection or self awareness. So
Mhm.
I think that is really important. But I also think we need other people to be that mirror for us as well. It's a combination.
Understood. Yeah, yeah. Having a combination of the two,
Mhm.
one area can help reveal some things that say the other can't, and vice versa.
Mhm.
Yeah, at least how it reads in my head. Um, uh, I tell you, I know we only scratched the surface, but from what I read in your bio and what we've talked about so far, to me, I truly find it fascinating, and it's got to be. I don't want to say complicated, but it's got to be very tricky. And the reason why I say tricky, and maybe that's a poor choice of words, is because I'm thinking, and I want to ask you, in your experience, um, in trying to externalize someone's feelings that they're repressing.
Mm.
Okay. Um, in the counseling work that you've done with a client, have you ever encountered someone, and I'm not saying they are maliciously or deceitfully trying to do this, but it's just a subconscious part of them that may have one um one feeling or emotion disguised behind another.
Mm.
And I want to give you an example.
Yeah.
The example is, let's say, someone really truly exhibits anger,
Mm,
anger, and it may be that anger is exhibited in a certain setting, or
mm,
there's a certain trigger, right? When a person just brings up a topic, or another person, maybe an ex, and it's whatever the case may be, it triggers that anger, um, and in your work with them, you discover that anger is really a mask
mm,
covering fear that they have
mm.
about something. Have you ever had an experience like that?
So I don't experience so much people's firsthand anger in therapy. However,
Okay.
I used to specialize in couples, and I would
Mhm.
it's crazy when you go from the individual who you see a certain way, and then they bring in their partner the next session, and you're like, "Oh, wow, you're like a different person."
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
in the best way. So,
Uh-huh.
um, anyway, but now I wouldn't say I see the anger, but I hear what you're saying. And Aubrey, you're onto something, because anger is actually always considered a secondary emotion.
Mm,
So we have primary emotions like fear.
right.
Primary emotions can be sadness,
Mhm.
happiness. And then here's the big one, though, or there's like kind of big two that cause anger in my experience, that are always under the anger.
Yes.
So there's always something under the anger.
Mhm.
That's what I mean by secondary emotion.
Gotcha.
Um, I think fear can be part of it, but I think if we're going to be really precise,
Yeah.
what is under the anger is a feeling of perceived rejection
Okay.
or betrayal of some kind. And I say perceived because, you know, Aubrey, one thing I have learned in doing my own reflection on myself is that, like, I am very triggered by silence in the presence of other people. Like, I
Mm.
don't know if you can relate to that, but a lot of people can when I talk about it on my podcast.
Yeah.
Um, where I'm fine with silence by myself, but if I'm with you, like, if you're silent, oh my God, I'm gonna like talk.
Really?
I'm gonna ask you questions. I mean, I'm more aware of it now, so I don't do it
Sure.
as much.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that's what made me become a therapist in a way too, was like I learned to ask good questions at a young age because I couldn't tolerate the silence.
I see.
Um, so so silence to me with another person feels what I think I've learned. It feels like I'm getting the cold shoulder. It feels like I'm getting the silent
Oh,
treatment,
yes.
which
Yes.
is a form of rejection. So, again, that word perceived. So, for
Yes.
me, silence is associated with perceived rejection. I know intellectually that Aubrey's just more quiet than I am, or whatever, but young Bronwyn, who is very much alive and well, is feeling like she's just gotta, fill in the blank space because it feels too familiar. It feels too
Yeah.
painful. It
Mm.
brings her back to a very silent childhood and
I see.
feeling very rejected. So,
Mhm.
um, now that's my response to that perceived rejection. But I had an incident with my daughter, who's now 20, about a year ago, where she was still living at home at the time. And I went downstairs into the kitchen for lunch, and she was in the kitchen at the same time.
Yeah.
She was silent. It was silent. And this is before I was so aware of my own trigger. So
Yeah.
I start asking her questions because that's what I do. And
Mhm.
she's my daughter, and she's 19, and she's just not having it. She is just like, nah,
Mm.
I'm not going to answer your questions. So
Yeah.
I start getting angry.
Oh.
Yeah. And we get in like a full on fight. So, so that I have learned after reflecting back on that fight, like, oh, that's my trigger. And
Mhm.
I am responsible for my trigger, not my daughter.
I see.
And so that's like a boundary. And that's a boundary I teach to all my clients and talk a lot about on my podcast too,
Yeah.
is that we are only responsible for our feelings. We are never responsible for another person's feelings.
Right.
I am responsible to you, Aubrey, but I am not responsible for you. And that's a really big distinction. So if I'm triggered, and vice
Mhm.
versa. So if I'm triggered, by the silence,
Right.
that's my responsibility. As much as I want it to be your responsibility, it's not. It's
Hmm.
always my responsibility to do the self-talk. Okay, it's quiet, Bronwyn. That's okay. Blah blah blah. Aubrey still likes you. Whatever that self-talk needs
Right.
to be for myself. But
Yeah.
that's my responsibility. And the fight that I had with my daughter is I was trying to offload my trigger onto her and expect her to be responsible for my feelings.
And thus the cycle begins, right?
Well,
Action, reaction, I guess.
yeah, right, in that
Yeah.
case, but
Yeah.
afterwards, after a couple hours, I reflected on it and I was like, "Oh my god, this is all because I'm triggered by silence." And that was actually the first time I realized just how triggering silence is to me and why.
Understood. Understood. The beautiful thing about self-awareness, and you illustrated it so graciously, in admitting this, of something yourself that you're working on, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about self-awareness is we can exercise it anytime, right?
Mhm.
You gave an example of exercising it, um, in the midst of the event,
Yeah.
realizing, okay, this is a trigger of mine. I'm responsible for, not my daughter.
Mhm.
And then, in retrospect,
Mhm.
as self-reflection, right? It can't happen without self-awareness, to the ability to reflect. And so you again eloquently, um, illustrated and describe, how you did that afterwards as well. So that's something I just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
underscore for the listeners in terms of self-awareness and reflection, and how self-awareness can be helpful and used, at any time, before the event, during the event, after
Mhm.
the event. Would you agree or have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I learn the most retrospectively, which
Mhm.
isn't how I'd like to learn it, but I have found that's
Right.
how it works. So it takes like a posture of
Hmm.
humility. It takes a posture
Hmm.
of humility of saying, you know what? Like you said earlier, we're human. I'm human. You're human. Humans learn through
Yeah.
trial and error. Life is a learn by doing
Yes.
experience. Like, so I can make mistakes and I can reflect back and go, I made a mistake.
Mhm.
And guess what? I'm learning from it. But if we shame ourselves, we go to a place of all bad, which
Mhm.
is shame, we don't learn. We don't learn. We can't learn. It debilitates us. So
Yeah.
shame has no positive function. It just causes us and then
Yeah.
we talked about people who will come see a therapist versus those who won't. Those who with tremendous shame will not see a therapist because they are certain that the therapist is going to shame them further and they're
Mhm.
projecting that onto the therapist. So why would they go?
Right, that's their trigger,
Mhm.
and like you said, they're projecting that onto the therapist, and thank you for touching on that, Bronwyn, because I wanted to talk about that next. Um, 2 absolute toxic and poisonous,
Mm,
elements and
mm,
feelings, I believe in my heart of hearts, is shame and guilt.
mm,
Um, Self-inflicted
mhm,
feelings due to past events, that may or may not even be within our control at the time that they happened or that we
mhm.
encountered them. Um, Shame and guilt can be so incredibly damaging. I don't have to tell you that, obviously.
Yeah.
But I've learned over time that if not properly dealt with, it can even have a generational impact, I believe.
Oh, yes.
You
Yes,
know, so how can
absolutely.
we teach our children to better gauge and manage guilt and shame better than we did when we were their age? Because
Yeah.
it can totally carry that
Well,
toxicity from generation to generation.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's actually really easy. So we don't
Okay.
teach them like, "Hey, children, let's sit down and talk about shame." We teach them by, let's say I have my 5-year-old Johnny, and I say, "Johnny, I see how angry you are, and I
Yeah.
don't blame you. I don't blame you because your sister just stole your toy again,
Right.
and I'd be angry too,
Mhm.
but you can't bonk her on the head. That's not okay.
Right.
But you can be as angry as you want, and you can
Mhm.
tell me how angry you are, and I don't blame you one bit. So
Mhm.
when we validate their feelings, we name the feelings that they're having.
Mhm.
When I say, when Johnny's 10 and he comes home and I say, Johnny, it sounds like you felt humiliated when your teacher called on you in front of the whole class like that.
Yeah.
So I'm naming what he's not saying, but I'm hearing with like just his story. So
Yes.
when we do that, when we listen, that starts with listening. That's the big
Yes.
one. And then
Yes.
we really listen, we empathize. Empathy doesn't mean I'm feeling humiliated and I can relate to Johnny's humiliation. No, it means I'm leaving me. I'm imagining I'm him. I'm imagining how I would feel if the teacher
Right.
did that to me.
Right.
And now I'm able to attune with those feelings. And so then I name them. I say, that must have felt humiliating. So by saying that, by naming the feelings, by listening, by paying attention to his feelings, I am teaching him without teaching, like
Yeah.
didactically. I'm
Yeah.
teaching him that he matters, that his
Mhm.
feelings matter, that
Mhm.
he's important.
Mhm.
Um, I'm teaching him that his feelings, even the angry ones, are not shameful. Then
Yes.
that none of them are shameful. So he's learning, he's unlearning the shame or
Yeah.
not learning the shame just by having one parent, even if it's just one parent or consistent adult presence in his life who's just like, yeah, I don't blame you for being mad. Even with
Yeah.
me, I don't blame you. You kind of have a point. Like, I was a little quick there to punish you, Johnny. So
Yeah.
just being a humble, having that, that posture of humility and
Yes.
really attuning to my children, they're not going to have shame.
Understood.
And
Understood.
especially if they see me apologize or if they see
Yeah.
me say, you know, I didn't do the best job. So when I say that, when I say, I think I did make a mistake when I, gave you a timeout. I think I was preemptive. I think I was too quick to punish or whatever.
Mm.
When I model that for them,
Yes.
just by saying that, they are learning, oh, humans make mistakes. Mistakes are normal. They're not shameful.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm about to I'm getting a little emotional here as you say that because a couple things. For one, um you're setting an example, right? And you are the example. Hey, look, I'm the parent, but I don't always get it right, you know. And you talk about humility, which by the way, is another one of the four cornerstones to personal growth, self-awareness and humility. So thank you for pointing that out. But as soon as you mentioned that, in the example saying, "Hey, Johnny, I may have given you time out too early instead of listening to your you fully explain and so forth," it made me think of, I can't believe I'm gonna mention this, but it made me think of, let's see, my son who's now 25 or 26, he
Yeah.
just turned 26. When in my first marriage, he lived with me from 5 to adulthood. And so, on the weekends, he or every other weekend, he would go with his mother and I would take him. So when he was like 6 years old, one time, it was a Friday and it was his weekend to go to his mother's, and I would drive him to his mother's. And I'll just quickly say this. That Friday happened to be progress report time when the teachers would bring would enclose a progress report with the student, and then child comes home, shows you the progress report. And I saw, a couple areas, there were some good areas, and then there were some other questionable areas. And so um, we got in the car, we took that 25-minute drive to his mother's, and I am just hammering into him about, this and everything. And so then I, walk him in the house, tell his mother, and then, I said, I'll see you on Sunday, and then I leave. And I drive back, and that weekend I'm at home and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, Aubrey, what have you done? What have you done? I mean, you, I felt horrible. And the reason why I felt horrible, Bronwyn, is because, he was looking forward to seeing his mother and having a good weekend, spending time with his mother.
Mm,
I just yammered into him over and over and over again, making him feel less and less and less and down and down and down, going into the weekend, where he could have, I'm not saying he was bummed out the whole weekend, but I set that precedence,
mm.
of him just being bummed out all weekend, not being in good spirits to spend time with his mom on that weekend, and then so that Sunday when I went there to pick him up, I had to I apologized to her and I apologized to him. I said, I want you to be in the best mood, and I know you're looking forward to spending time with your mom, and I don't want to, have you start your weekend feeling down because I laid into you on your progress report. I'm sorry. I should not have done that. That's a bad way to set your child up when seeing their other parent. And so, I said, we'll deal with your progress report, but I should not have done that. And that's the emotional part of me that I messed up, and I acknowledge that in front of him, in front of her. And as you were explaining that in your example with Johnny, it made me think it took me back to that time
Mm.
over 20 years ago or 20 years ago. So thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to kind of go off track a little bit
No,
there,
I love
but
it. I'd love to hear that.
well, thank you. I wanted to know, do you or have you with your clients ever seen any nonverbals from a behavioral standpoint? Any nonverbals that kind of supports the emotion or the feelings that
Hmm.
they're exhibiting that you try to, I don't know, exercise or bring out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, I'm trying to think about all the nonverbal. I mean, there's so many, but
Yeah,
um, so I would say what I'm focusing on now and where I've come to right now is just, and what is so incredible to me is how
right.
much our feelings are in our bodies. I mean,
Yeah,
feelings are invisible. So we think, oh, anger is invisible. I don't have anger,
yeah,
I don't know. I guess it's gone. But it's just because it's invisible. I like to say anger is as real as this computer, this laptop that we're
yeah,
talking on, as real as
right.
the chair I'm on. It is
Mhm.
more real. It is more real, and it does not dissipate into the ether. It stores up in our bodies. It really,
Yes,
really does. And not just anger, shame,
yes.
hatred. Um,
Mm,
and so I will ask a client when they say something that I really think they're having a lot of feelings about. I'll say,
yeah,
"What are you feeling in your body right now?"
right, right.
And it's so incredible because I'm learning as I go, but a lot of them, they'll say the anger, certain anger seems to be in the chest, but then other anger, and then they'll feel it like sometimes in their arms, their hands, their legs, but a lot of it is in the like stomach area, the gut.
Yeah,
And I've come to realize that is like hatred, disgust, and shame. And I'm not sure those three things are different. I think that shame is a type of self-contempt,
yeah,
self-hatred, or
yeah.
self-disgust.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's just disgust at the other person, and
Right,
sometimes it's disgust at the other person, but when you're a child, we turn that disgust inward on us and we feel shame instead of knowing that the parent, because we have zero objectivity as a child. We have zero
right.
objectivity to say, my
Yeah.
dad is behaving in such a shameful way. So as a child,
Mhm.
we internalize our disgust of the way dad's acting and we carry it around in us and we think we're shameful. Or as
Mm.
a child, so the example I gave of the silent treatment, just feeling like I didn't matter at all.
Right.
As a child,
Yeah.
I didn't have the objectivity to go, my mom is like a really sick person who like
Mhm.
doesn't ever engage me, and that's really not healthy or normal or good.
Right.
I didn't have that objectivity, so I, took it as like, I'm worthy of rejection. I'm not lovable, right? And that's what
Oh, I
children do.
see.
So they
Yeah.
carry it around in their bodies. And, Freud said it so well. He said, depression is anger turned inward. And that's
Mm.
exactly true.
Mhm.
Anxiety,
Mhm.
by the way, is also anger turned inward. Mania is anger turned inward. Panic,
Interesting.
panic is anger turned inward. It's
Yeah.
psychosis is anger turned inward. It's all anger that we hold on in our bodies because we don't feel entitled or self-aware to say, that's just really wrong.
Yeah.
That's just really effing wrong.
Yeah. No, for
And
sure.
so
Mhm.
when people come to therapy, I'm the mirror going, that was really effing wrong. And they're like,
Mhm.
wow, I've been waiting my whole life, I think, to hear that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, if it's received that way, and not in a with an air of denial. um
Well, I'm saying it to my client about how they were treated.
how they were treated. I'm sorry, not how they responded, but how they were treated. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, 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 yeah. And yeah, they have been waiting for so long to hear that. And that validates, right?
Mm.
How they were feeling. And wanted to also get your take on I don't know if this is two sides of the same coin, two types of anger, or if it's just all anger. Okay. You have people who are carrying around deep rooted anger that may have been sourced from a childhood experience, an abusive parent or an abusive upbringing. And then you have I don't want to say an ordinary person, but you have a person who didn't experience that growing up.
Mhm.
And, we sometimes we, as I call, lose our cool
Mhm.
occasionally, blow up over something. Um, uh, and I'm going to give you my example. Okay. Um, I always try to just keep a very calm demeanor, very optimistic, and try to have a healthy outlook on things as they come, whether it's good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate. Okay. If something happens, like, let's see, my dog. Oh, she's not here anymore. Okay. Well, my dog, for instance, she has really frustrated me at times, especially in her early years.
Yeah.
And I've lost my cool with her a couple
Mhm.
times now, never abused her, just really lost my cool and raised my voice, and had some intensity behind that. Now, shortly after doing that, it's like dogs are so smart. I mean, she just has this look on her face and she stays out of my way and she just goes in the other room. If she sees me walk in the room, she goes into a different room and she's just quiet the whole time. And even without her exhibiting that as a response to me, which I feel, I I still feel I feel this guilt. Guilt sets in after the anger,
Mm.
because I yelled at her like that.
Mm.
Okay. Whether she responded in a way where she felt down because I was unhappy with her or not. I I feel guilty because I always try to keep a calm demeanor. Um, and all this leads to a question, believe me. This leads to my question. If you can give us a healthy example, an example of a healthy perspective or outlook that we should have with it.
Yeah, Aubrey, honestly, I'm not sure you have realistic expectations of yourself. I really am not. Um,
Okay.
because we live on planet Earth and the
Mhm.
real and the ideal are very disparate most of the time. And it's okay when things go awry, when reality is far from the ideal. It's okay to get angry. I don't think raising a voice at a dog or a person is a bad thing whatsoever. I think it's really the content of what we say. So I'll give you an example of how I interacted with my cat a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
And at the time I thought, I wish I knew this when my daughter was little, because
Mhm.
I would have felt more free. Because I
Yeah.
think then when my voice did get loud with my daughter, I felt the same way. I felt guilty, like I'm not
Mhm.
allowed to be human. I need to be some kind of perfect robot mom.
Yeah.
So, but this is what I did with my cat, and this is what I would recommend. So,
Okay.
my cat came up to she's not supposed to be in my bedroom where I do all my work.
Right.
And I let her in. I kind of gave her an exception this one time. And of course, she like plows into one of my house plants and knocks it over. And
Oh gosh.
I had just knocked that same plant over like a week before. And then my husband had just knocked it over like a day or two before. So I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
So what I did, and this came naturally now, but it took a long time for me to get to where I am.
Yeah.
So her name is Tia, my cat.
Okay.
So she knocks it over, and I just say really loud, I go, Tia, I am so angry right now. I'm angry with you. You knocked over this plant again. It's the third time
Yeah.
week, but I'm angry at me because I shouldn't have let you up here in the first place. And I am so frustrated. I am so tired of cleaning up this plant. And I wonder if the plant's even going to live. And that's okay. That's just what I said
Okay.
and how I said it. And, I felt so relieved after that because I did not hold all my anger in. I was responsible with it. I channeled it out into my
Very
words.
responsible.
But I
Yeah.
did not attack my cat's character. Obviously, if
No.
this was a person, this is where I would
Yes.
regret it. I would feel very guilty and regret
Yes.
attacking, saying something like, really mean and cruel. I didn't say
Right.
anything mean and cruel. I said, I'm angry. And I listed every reason why. Some of that was her, a lot of it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my God, if I had to do over being a mom to a young child, that's what I would do now. Because I didn't know that then, that that's okay. And
Yeah.
that's actually probably the closest to ideal you can get. And what I did back then is I held it all inside, and then I would like scream at times, as I know
Yes.
I'm the only parent of a young child to do.
Right.
So is that preferable? Heck no, that is not a preferable thing to do.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think, I want to give you permission, Aubrey, let your voice get loud. I think what matters is that you're not attacking someone with your words. I really do. Loud
Yes.
voices can be triggering and scary, but they're pretty innocuous overall.
Yeah, no, for sure. They truly are, and I love that recommendation. I particularly love how that it's not a tirade, but it's an expressive event,
Yeah.
right? It's an expressive response. Your expressive response was not targeted 100% directly at Tia,
Mm-mm.
right? You claim responsibility. That's a responsible response. So, yes, I love that recommendation. I'm gonna take that to heart. I really am because I don't really try to be intentionally malicious, and I try real hard not to be malicious in a vocal raised voice response. It's but it is directed 100%, and I think I need to be a little more responsible with that, and as you said, give myself permission. So um I asked you that question in a selfish way, but I'm truly hoping in my heart of hearts that some listeners can relate to that when it comes to interacting with either their pets, their children, or their spouse, their
Well,
significant
let me
other.
give you
So,
another example that I think might help as well.
okay.
So remember, I am responsible for my feelings.
Yes.
And I have found that by articulating them into words in the present moment is the most responsible thing I can do. So I did that for myself. I
Yes.
felt so much better. I immediately was calm after that.
Great.
Um, so let me give you an example. My husband and I just went out of town last weekend.
Yeah.
Um, we had decided we were going to clean the house before we leave, and we wanted to leave pretty early.
Mhm.
And we were on the same page with that. So it's in the morning. I'm cleaning. He was on the computer reading the paper, and I said, "So we're gonna clean right now, right?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, just let me wrap this up." Well, give me a few minutes. It had
Mhm.
been a few minutes, and I'm still cleaning, and he's still on his computer.
Reading.
So this is what I said. I said, "Steve, I'm starting to feel resentful because you said you'd be cleaning and you're still on the computer."
Mm. Yeah.
That's what I said. I
Yeah.
was exactly honest with what was happening with me right then. I
Right.
was starting to feel resentful. I didn't say,
Yeah.
"I'm resentful as hell." I
Right.
just
Right. No.
I said, "I'm starting to feel resentful."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he goes, "Got it." And he shut his computer and he started cleaning. And that was me being responsible for my feelings, not being ashamed. Oh, it's
Nope.
not okay to be resentful. Yeah, it is. My resentment
Right.
is telling me
Yeah.
something's wrong, and
Yeah.
I'm going to articulate it. And
Yeah.
he is a safe person that I can do that with, right? Not
Right.
everyone is a safe person that we can be authentic with like that. But my husband
Very
is
true.
a safe person to do that with, and it worked.
Yeah. And he knows he's a safe person you can do that with.
But
Yeah.
it's not
And
fair to either one of us if I'm like, "Oh, I don't
yeah.
wanna
No.
be
No.
resentful, so I'm gonna stuff it," and then,
Yeah.
like, 20 minutes later, I'm going to blow up, or
Blow
I'm
up.
gonna be
Yeah.
passive aggressive, so
Yeah.
we finally get in the car to leave for the weekend, and I'm, like, not talking, and I'm being a jerk. Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
neither one of those is
It's not
fair.
productive. No, it's
Not
not fair.
it's
No.
not fair.
No, no. And you knowing he's a safe person to do this with, and him knowing that, and knowing that, you can express this to him because he will take it in the right way and respond in the right way. That's healthy, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah. So I do want to thank you for sharing that. Now, Bronwyn, you have masters in counseling and nutrition. Um, this is a weird question, but it made me wonder: can our intake of nutrition, or let's say lack of nutrition, have an impact on our repressed feelings of the things we've been talking about: anger, shame, depression?
That's a good question. So Aubrey, I would say I would used to be a big believer in that in the past, and I'm now coming to the point where I think it's the opposite. I think
Okay.
so. A lot of therapists, I kind of alluded that a lot of therapists aren't very good at what they do, unfortunately. A lot
Mm,
of therapists believe, yeah, you need to change your diet, and that's going to help, your moods, whatever.
yeah.
I think helping you, like, externalize finally at long last the anger that's inside you, the suppressed anger, and learn how to channel it in healthy ways,
Yeah.
such as boundaries and assertiveness. When I see people get healthy in those ways, they will naturally come back to me like a few sessions later and be like, "Oh, guess what? I'm starting to shop at the farmer's market, and I'm cooking at home, and I'm, like, eating
Yes.
all these healthy recipe,"
Yes.
or I'm exercising. I'm like, "Well, okay." So,
Yes.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I think
Mhm.
feeling better needs to be the first step, and that is by us channeling our anger out of our bodies in healthy ways, learning to have a healthy relationship with our anger, which is a healthy relationship with ourselves. And once we do that, we naturally want to self nurture, which is what a good diet is. It's a natural way to want to self nurture and care for our body, and that comes pretty naturally.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you articulated it that way because I started thinking of, let's say emotional eating. When
Mhm,
someone's depressed,
mhm.
they last thing they're thinking about is eating healthy. I mean, they're like, give me 5 large pizzas. I want a couple cheeseburgers, or let me run to Taco Bell, or let me get this dozen donuts or something, but managing those feelings, not through junk food, but managing feelings through work and
Mm,
counseling,
mm.
puts them in a better place to where, emotionally they're stable,
Yeah.
and in a state of mind to where now they want to focus on that nurturing side, from a nutrition food intake perspective. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's the other way around.
It's
That
the
that
other
makes
way around.
makes so much sense. So
Yeah.
much sense. So, Bronwyn, can you tell us about your podcast? It's called Angry at the Right Things. Is that right?
Yes, Angry at the Right Things. It
Yeah.
is found wherever you subscribe to your podcast. And
Hmm.
yeah, I talk a lot about everything we touched on today. I give a lot of
Yeah.
my own stories of my own life, my experience with major depressive disorder,
Hmm.
as well as like repairing my relationship with my daughter,
Hmm.
which just happened over the last year. Um, so yeah, just examples of how to do this weird thing called life, how to be responsible for our feelings, and also who is a safe person and who's not, and how to discern that.
Yeah.
Um, because we don't want to throw our pearls before swine. We don't want to open up and try to accommodate someone who is wanting us to feel responsible for their feelings, because we're not. And that's going to make us sick. That is going to
Yeah.
make us sick if we try to be. So,
Hmm.
and guilty. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I talk about all these things, and my goal is just to get it out to people who aren't my clients, to help people who might
Hmm.
never see me as a therapist, but as many people as possible to kind of reorient their relationship with themselves. And that's really the key to healing is learning to self-attune to heal our relationship with ourselves.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Because on the other side of that, we can have an improved quality of life that we may not have even ever fathomed, you know. That's one of the beautiful things about self-realization, um, self-awareness, transformation, and all those different things, that we can do to work on ourselves. Also, with the help of proper counseling. So, yeah, that sounds like a great podcast. I'm going to subscribe to it. And you've alluded to where we can find your podcast, but how else can the listeners follow you and learn more about your great work?
Yeah, well, right now it's mainly my podcast. I
Mm.
recently made a Facebook page. It's Angry at the Right Things as well. I
Nice.
haven't really done a lot with that, but all my podcasts and then my videos, the last 4 podcasts I actually have on video. Those are
Hmm.
on YouTube. They're on my Facebook page. Um, and then I have a video on YouTube and I think it's on my Facebook page too, of
Hmm.
just my parenting. I do parenting talks for parents of young children. So,
Oh, great.
mhm.
Fantastic. All right. Well, if you don't mind, I'd love to put your Facebook page link, your YouTube link, channel link in the episode show notes so the listeners can subscribe to your podcast, watch some of your parenting tutorials, as well as learn more about the great work you're doing. Um, Bronwyn Schweigerdt. Remember the name, everyone. Bronwyn, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and giving us some great insights on how we can lean in and become truly healthy with the feelings that we have as human beings.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And we feel like this at many times, in our struggles, in the midst of our struggles, that um, we're alone, right? And there's no hope. But I'm here to tell you, in our daily struggles, you aren't alone, and hope is always around the corner. I humbly ask that you please share this show with someone you know needing motivation and support. We're all roadies on this journey of life.
Mm.
and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.